Welcome back. We're here. We are on 3rd Nephi chapter 2. Amazing things happening here. Here's a summary. Wickedness and abominations increase among the people. The Nephites and Lamanites unite to defend themselves against the Gadianton robbers. Converted Lamanites become white and are called Nephites. Ooh, okay. Probably going to have some good combos here. All right. One second. Alrighty. I stopped the treadmill. Okay. Let's start it back up. Let's start our walk. Okay. So after only 3 years, this is where we're at. And it came to pass that thus passed away the 95th year, and also the people began to forget those signs and wonders which they had heard, and began to be less and less astonished at a sign or at a wonder, at a sign or a wonder from heaven, insomuch that they began to be hard in their hearts and blind in their minds, and began to disbelieve all which they had heard and seen. So it just goes to show, like, signs are not going to help to convert us. You know, we're going to forget those signs, especially if we don't write them down, especially if we don't make a point of remembering those miracles. We're definitely going to forget. So, verse 2, imagining up some vain thing in their hearts, that it was wrought by men and by the power of the devil, to lead away and deceive the hearts of the people. And thus did Satan get possession of the hearts of the people again, insomuch that he did blind their eyes and lead them away to believe that the doctrine of Christ was a foolish and a vain thing. Pretty crazy, right? Oh man, today I'm feeling extra fatigue from that time of the month, you know? Speaking of which, my husband said he watched a NPR episode, or he listened to an episode on NPR podcast, and they talked about this device that somebody in Canada has created that allows, that basically simulates cramps, and they have a level 0 through 10. And there's been guys that have been doing it. And anyway, it's been helping some of those guys be a little bit more compassionate towards their partner. And it's just kind of funny. I'm like, oh, wow. I didn't think that was like a machine that could even be made. And I am a little bit curious as to what level I'm at with those things, you know? Anyways, okay. Verse 3, and I should put the link somewhere, right, for you, so you could listen to it, because it's pretty awesome. Anyway, and it came to pass that the people began to wax strong in wickedness and abominations, and they did not believe that there should be any more signs or wonders given. And Satan did go about leading away the hearts of the people, tempting them and causing them that they should do great wickedness in the land. Isn't that sad? How do we allow Satan to warp our experiences with Christ? How do we allow Satan to warp our experiences that we've had, and to deny the things that we've experienced? Like, it doesn't make sense, right? Like, you just think, like, there's no way I'm ever gonna forget my mission, right? And there's so many missionaries that have fallen away and don't have a testimony anymore. And you're just like, how is that even possible? Like it doesn't even compute in my mind. I'm like, does not compute, you know, like how? And the only answer is how Satan has tricked them, you know, and he tricks all of us. And I guess the same could be said about somebody like me who, you know, fell away at like 16 or 17 or whatever. And after being, I wouldn't say born in the church, because I wasn't. My mom was a convert, but like, you know, I was baptized at 8. So it feels like I should be anyway. But anyway, so yeah, I'm sure somebody that was baptized later on than I was could easily say the same thing about me and say, like, how could she fall away? She got baptized at 8, you know? Okay, so verse 4, And thus did pass away the 90 and 6th year, and also the 90 and 7th year, and also the 90 and 8th year, and also the 90 and 9th year. Like this. This is how they passed. And also 100 years had passed away since the days of Mosiah, who was king over the people of the Nephites. And 609 years had passed away since Lehi left Jerusalem, and 9 years had passed away from the time when the sign was given, which was spoken of by the prophets that Christ should come into the world. Okay, so this is when Christ is 9. Now the Nephites began to reckon their time from this period when the sign was given, or from the coming of Christ. Therefore, 9 years had passed away. So this is a new time reckoning. Okay, so a quote here, but from Red Headed Hostess says, 3 years go by, and people began to forget the signs, and they become less and less astonished. And Satan had 3 years to craft deceptions and lies, and those who had not nourished their faith began to disbelieve. The signs alone were not enough for them. Give Satan enough time, and he will come up with something that will pull us away if our foundation is weak, even if we have been shown great signs. Real unshakable faith takes effort and work. So those who were not committed eventually imagined explanations and ultimately led them away. Elder Neal A. Maxwell speaks of the division that will happen in the last days, and is a warning to us not to become desensitized like the Nephites in verse 1. Okay. So this is kind of a long quote from Elder Neal A. Maxwell. Here we go. In the last days, happily the church will grow extensively, with its membership being scattered upon all the face of the earth. Nevertheless, its dominions will still be comparatively small because of wickedness, which will close the ears of many to the gospel message. There will also be a great division among the people. This stressful polarization will ironically help in the final shaking of that strange confederacy, the kingdom of the devil, in order that the honest in heart, even therein, may receive the truth. This great division is what President Brigham Young also saw, saying, "It was revealed to me in the commencement of this church that the church would spread, prosper, grow, and extend, and that in proportion to the spread of the gospel among the nations of the earth, so would the power of Satan rise." End quote of President Brigham Young. And then this is still Elder Maxwell. Happily, even though the world worsens around us, there will be many, many fine and wonderful men and women of all races and creeds, and of no religious creeds at all, who will continue to lead decent and useful lives. Besides, as Mormon said, scriptural commentary on declining conditions is not communicated to weigh thee down, but instead to help us live so that Christ may lift thee up. Thus, what I have said is not said in alarm at all, but rather so that we might be noticing and preparing. Prophecies are given in part that we might know and remember that these things had been made known beforehand, to the intent that we might believe. Today's inattentive people will be like an earlier desensitized people who began to forget those signs and wonders which they had heard, and began to be less and less astonished, and began to disbelieve all which they had heard and seen. So let us look at ourselves. For the church, the scriptures suggest both an accelerated sifting and accelerated spiritual and numerical growth, with all this preceding the time when the people of God will be armed with righteousness, not weapons, and when the Lord's glory will be poured out upon them. The Lord is determined to have a tried, pure, and proven people. End quote. Ooh, that's wild. Okay, Elder Neal A. Maxwell, April 1988 General Conference. Like, what does it make you feel like when we read that? Like, what does, I don't know, it makes me feel, for me anyway, it makes me feel like I need to check myself, you know? Like, where am I at with my testimony? Okay, then verse 9. And Nephi, who was the father of Nephi, who had the charge of the records, did not Wait, what? And Nephi, who was the father of Nephi, who had the charge of the records, did not return to the land of Zarahemla. Oh, okay. And could nowhere be found in all the land. And it came to pass that the people did still remain in wickedness, notwithstanding the much preaching and prophesying which was sent among them. And thus passed away the 10th year also. And the 11th year also passed away in iniquity. And it came to pass in the 13th year, there began to be wars and contentions. Okay, so remember, sorry, there's like a hair, you know, like when you get that phantom hair hitting your hand or your ankle or something. Okay, anyways, the hair, whatever. Okay, what was I saying? Oh, I was going to say, remember Christ was about 12 years old, maybe, when he went to the temple to preach. So what's crazy is they literally just skipped that whole year right here. So the 10th year and also the 11th year passed away in iniquity, and then bam, the 13th year. What? We just skipped his whole 12-year-old stage, which is sad because we really like that stage of Christ. Okay, so it came to pass in the 13th year, there began to be wars and contentions throughout all the land, for the Gadianton robbers had become so numerous, and did slay so many of the people, and did lay waste so many cities, and did spread so much death and carnage throughout the land, that it became expedient that all the people, both the Nephites and the Lamanites, should take up arms against them. So the Nephites and the Lamanites are now going to try to fight the Gadianton robbers. Okay. Therefore, all the Lamanites who had become converted unto the Lord did unite with their brethren, the Nephites, and were compelled for the safety of their lives and their women and their children to take up arms against those Gadianton robbers. Yea, and also to maintain their rights and the privileges of their church and of their worship and their freedom and their liberty. Okay, so the Nephites got to change their time reckoning, which I love, because that's how we reckon time now, which is, 2024 AD, which is Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. Yep, because he was born. And I love that. Now, of course, there's the peeps, the haters, who are all like, we don't want to reckon time from the Savior's birth. So they try to change it and make it something else, But we know what it is. We know what it is for real. You can't take that away from us. We know it's because of Jesus Christ that we reckon time the way we do right now, which is pretty awesome. It should just be a daily reminder that Christ was born, right? Christ is born. And it should just bring us joy, just to say the year, he came, he was born 2024 years ago. Amazing, right? Amazing. I love it so much. Anyway, I probably should talk about this to my kids, because they get to see the date written on their paper every day more than I do, right? Okay, verse 8, and then it says, so by the verse 11, 13 years had now passed away. So at this time, Jesus Christ was becoming a teenager in Nazareth, right? I love that Reddit hostess also pointed this out. And then the Gadianton robbers were becoming incredibly fierce. The Nephites and the Lamanites united in battle to battle them for their own safety, rights, freedoms, and liberties. These were serious times they were having. Okay, then verse 13 to 19. And it came to pass that before this 13th year had passed away, the Nephites were threatened with utter destruction because of this war, which had become exceedingly sore. And it came to pass that those Lamanites who had united with the Nephites were numbered among the Nephites, and their curse was taken from them, and their skin became white like unto the Nephites, and their young men and their daughters became exceedingly fair, and they were numbered among the Nephites and were called Nephites. And thus ended the 13th year. Okay, so something that I thought was interesting was when we taught this lesson in Sunday school, Not one time did we mention the color of skin. Right? Like it was not a thing for us. We're like, we're fine. We're fine with black people. We're fine with white people. We're fine with red people. We're fine with brown people. Like it's fine. Like adults. These were the things we were talking about. We were talking about how to center our lives on Christ and how to find joy and how Satan has tactics. But the youth, when we asked our 15-year-old, I'm like, so what did you guys talk about? He said they talked about the color of skin. And I was like, you're kidding. You're kidding. We didn't talk about Jesus Christ. Come on, guys. I'm like, anyway, but that's what Satan tries to put in our minds. Like it's all about our external, exterior, our looks, and and so I mean, I'm guessing the class went there because that's what the youth wanted to talk about, but also I saw that they had a whole handout, and so the teachers were focusing on this, and maybe it's because they knew that the youth would have this question, and so they were prepared, or they on purpose led it to that. And I want to say that they were more inspired and that the youth were really concerned about this, and so that's why they prepared extra for this. But that's what my son remembers talking about. Now, that being said, I do love the conversation that they had. They talked about how back in the day when you went into war, you would put like war paint and all these things, markings on your skin. And so scholars have said that those markings were markings that they self-inflicted and would be like similar to like, permanent makeup or tattoos or things like that. And they said that when it says that they were cursed with blackness or whatever, it was more like their countenance could be considered their countenance, and it also could be that they added this war paint and these things to themselves. They also talk about skins of blackness. They wore skins of animals, and so that's another way that they could signify skins. Do you remember the scene in, I think it's Black Panther, and they go to like the hill to find these new guys that are like big and burly to get them to help us, or to help the Wakanda peeps. Anyway, like they were wearing skins, and they were dark skins, and that could be another example. So they have a lot of, and you could look it up, if you're really concerned about the black and the white, you could look it up, but it was not having to do with the fact, it wasn't the color of their actual skin, like what they were born with, but it was more their countenance, the things that they were putting on themselves, and the markings that they were imposing on themselves. So I appreciate them having this conversation so that the youth can talk about it in a safe place, and people could ask these questions. But I also, how I have this theory of like, we interpret things in different ways than what the Lord may intend for us to interpret, right? But he also knows how we will interpret it based on our experience and our things anyway. And so what I'm getting to is when the Lord had the priesthood, I think it was more like when the Lord gave the priesthood to us here on earth, I think it was more the men that had the priesthood to begin with, who interpreted it as keeping it from the black men because of their societal whatever their society was like, right? And that's why, it seems like they were keeping, to us, it seems like they were keeping women down, and it seems like they were keeping the blacks down, and it seems like, white male supremacy and stuff like that. And I get it, because that is what was going on back then. But it wasn't the Lord that was telling them to do that. Does that make sense? Like, I believe that the Lord was like, y'all need to stop with this mess. And now we're going to, how do we make it more obvious that we need to include everybody, right? Like, how can we make it more obvious that the black people are totally able to have the priesthood, and you guys are crazy, and I don't know why we had to keep them from the priesthood, right? And then there are stories of people that Joseph Smith gave the priesthood to who were black, which I seriously love, right? And so it's like kind of awesome to know that the Lord finally had to intervene and be like, no, listen, we like, I love everybody. Give them the priesthood. It's fine, right? Like, that's kind of how I see it. You might see it a different way, but I think that it was our society who was being stubborn about that, and not the Lord being stubborn about that. Now, that's just according to Sister Winegar. You can throw it on the shelf, and you can ask the Lord later about who started it and who it was and all these things. But that's my interpretation, because I think it goes along with how the polygamy was going down the same way, right? Where it's like the Lord had this vision of what it could be, and the men are men and human, and they ruined it, and the Lord's like, we got to take that away right away, because y'all don't know how to do this, and this was not what we meant. Right? So again, this is like stuff according to Sister Winegar. So like, you do not have to take that to like, this is not doctrine, but this is just like how I have felt about those things, and how it helps me with that story, and hey, maybe later when I ask him, he's like, yeah, that's what it was. Then, that's what I'm gonna have to deal with later, but that's a problem for future Linda. And it's not going to get in the way of my current faith in Jesus Christ and my love for him. So I don't want that kind of stuff to get in the way. I grew up with predominantly black, what is it? I was going to say colleagues, but they're not colleagues, because we were in school, students, friends, and it was just awesome. And I love them. And it's so funny because the blacks being able to receive the priesthood, I think that came out in 1978 or 79. I wasn't even born. But can I tell you, when I was 14, I heard the talk. I heard that talk. I don't know how. I don't know if it was rebroadcast. I don't know if it was on TV. I don't know if it came on, if they shared it in conference or what. But I remember when I was 14, I literally bawled and felt like the blacks got priesthood then. It's so weird. Like, I remember it as if it was yesterday. I just, like, even now I get chills. Like, oh yeah, it's like the 9/11. Like, I witnessed that on the TV, right? And I know where I was. I know what I was doing. And I was crying and bawling and for 9/11. But I do remember the same for when the blacks were able to get the priesthood. And I was just like, crazy, right? And it wasn't until, no joke, as an adult woman, I was like, wait, like, my friends didn't get the priesthood, and like, they got it before I was born? Wait. Like, they could have the priesthood before I was born. Like, that came out before I was born. And it floored me. I was like, what? No, I thought it was when I was 14. I thought for sure that's when it came out. Nope. I guess it was when it was way before I was born, and I just heard it like that. And I think I needed to hear it then, because my dad was very racist. And at the time, I don't know how racist he is now. We don't really talk about that much. We rarely get to speak anyway, but like, that's just what I was like, that's crazy. So anyway, that was a huge tangent and side thing. But okay, so verse 17. And it came to pass in the commencement of the 14th year, the war between the robbers and the people of Nephi did continue and did become exceedingly sore. Nevertheless, the people of Nephi did gain some advantage of the robbers, insomuch that they did drive them back out of their lands into the mountains and into their secret places. And thus ended the 14th year. And in the 15th year, they did come forth against the people of Nephi. And because of the wickedness of the people of Nephi and their many contentions and dissensions, the Gadians and robbers did gain many advantages over them. And thus ended the 15th year, and thus were the people in a state of many afflictions. So this is so hard for them. And the sword of destruction did hang over them, insomuch that they were about to be smitten down by it, and this because of their iniquity. So crazy. Okay, so these verses give us an understanding of the awful state the Gadianton robbers were in, or because of the Gadianton robbers had brought to the land. And the Lamanites had joined with the Nephites, and the unity would have brought some strength, but the war was still absolutely terrible, even to the point that the Nephites were threatened with their utter destruction. And then these Gadianton robbers brought a wickedness of such great magnitude that all the people in the land were threatened by them. The Nephites and Lamanites were now combining their efforts to try to destroy them. But this was an absolutely brutal group. They had tried to murder and take over the governments, but when they were chased out of those positions, they retreated to the mountains and waged war from there. As we will see in the next chapter, they saw themselves as revolutionaries. They claimed that they were the good guys, which is likely why they were able to get so many recruits. But Satan was their founder, and he knows how powerful a group like this can be and the destruction and grief they can cause. Satan used groups like this to destroy the Jaredites, and he will use them to destroy the Nephites. In the book of Ether, Moroni noted that secret combinations are had among all people. Here are some important points about secret combinations. Okay, so this is from the Encyclopedia of Mormonism, okay, about secret combinations. It says, in Latter-day Scripture, secret combinations are groups of conspirators who plot and initiate works of darkness for evil and selfish purposes. Secret combinations have existed since the days of Cain. They operate in secrecy to perform evil acts for the purpose of gaining power over the minds and actions of the people. They defile, defraud, murder, deceive, and destroy the elements of good government, religious or secular. Their goal is to seize power and to rule over all the people, which results in the destruction of human freedom and agency and the paralysis of peaceful and just communities. The Lord has warned that secret combinations will be present in modern society. They threaten freedom everywhere. However, Latter-day Saints believe that secret combinations and their practices can be overcome, but only through righteous living and full support of honest government. End quote. Right? Yes. So about 40 years before this point, when the Gadianton robbers were growing, we were taught in Helaman 6:37-38 that while the Lamanites were laboring to destroy the robbers among them, through the preaching of the word of God, the Nephites did the opposite. They did not try to destroy that secret society, but instead they built them up and supported the robbers. So they grew and grew, and now all of these years later, even a unified war cannot conquer the robbers. So now this was the state of the land, 15 years after the great sign. How wonderful it would have been to be able to focus on preparing for the Lord's visit to the Nephites, but instead, the people had returned to wickedness and were fighting for their survival. So instead of thriving, they're just surviving, which is the worst place to be. Am I right? Like, you're not focusing on the right things. You're not progressing. You're not able to function. You're not able to do anything. So, okay, so that's the end of that chapter, and we're going to read the Read It, Live It. 1 second. Okay, here's the Read It, Live It. Can you see it? Okay. Says, here's how you know Satan is working on your heart. You forget past signs. Okay, go. And wonders. You forget past signs and wonders. You become less and less astonished at wonders from heaven. You begin to disbelieve. Don't let him get possession of your heart. See the wonders. Be astonished. Oh, I love that so much. I love that so much. Okay. Don't forget those miracles. Find ways to remember and preserve those miracles from heaven that you have seen in your life. Until 3 Nephi chapter 3, stay strong, warrior, and remember.